If you think inheriting millions is a guarantee of an easy life, you need to hear what happened to the Harrington family. They lost everything because of a single line written in a will 40 years ago. And the worst part? None of them saw it coming. There's a secret that wealthy families guard closely. It's not about how much money they have in the banks. It's not about properties or businesses. It's about how they lose everything overnight because of inheritance clauses that seem harmless on paper but destroy entire empires when they get to court. Today I'm going to show you 3 real cases of families that were completely ruined by wills that nobody read properly. And believe me, the third case will leave you speechless. Let's start with the Harrington family from Chicago. In 1982, Thomas Harrington built an empire in the real estate sector. We're talking about more than $300 million in assets, commercial buildings, land, investments spread across 7 American states. The guy was a giant in business. Thomas had 3 children: Richard, the oldest, who always worked in his father's company; Margaret, the middle one, who graduated in law but never practiced, preferring to live off the family income; and Daniel, the youngest, who everyone considered the black sheep because he dropped everything to be a visual artist in New York. In 2003, Thomas died of a heart attack. He was 71 years old. The family was devastated, but at the same time, everyone knew it was time to open the will and see how things would be divided. After all, $300 million were at stake. The family lawyer scheduled the reading of the will for a Tuesday in March. Richard showed up with his wife and 2 children. Margaret arrived accompanied by her husband. Daniel came alone, straight from New York, still somewhat disconnected from the family context after years of living away. The will had 47 pages. That's right, 47 pages of legal text, clauses, conditions, subdivisions. Nobody had the patience to read all that. The lawyer went straight to the point. The fortune would be divided equally among the 3 children, each getting 1/3. So far, so normal. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But there was a clause on page 32, a clause that the lawyer mentioned quickly, as if it were an unimportant technical detail. The clause said the following: should any of the heirs initiate legal proceedings against another heir related to this inheritance, this heir automatically loses their share, which will be redistributed to the others. At the time, nobody cared. Why would they? They were siblings. Of course they weren't going to fight in court over money. They grew up together, spent Christmases together. They were family. 6 months later, problems started. Richard, as the son who had always worked in his father's company, thought he should have total control over company decisions. Margaret disagreed. She wanted to sell some properties and divide the money. Daniel didn't care much. He just wanted to receive his share and go back to his life in New York. The arguments started small. Meetings that lasted hours without resolving anything, crossed emails with veiled accusations, family lunches that ended in heavy silence. 1 year after Thomas's death, Richard made a decision. He sought out a private lawyer without telling his siblings and filed a lawsuit requesting exclusive management rights over the company. His justification? He had worked alongside his father for 30 years. He understood the business. The other 2 didn't. What Richard didn't realize, or perhaps completely forgot, was that clause on page 32. Margaret, when notified of the lawsuit, was furious, but not because of the company management. She was furious because she realized the opportunity. She remembered the clause, and she did exactly what anyone would do in that situation. She invoked the clause. The case went to court for real now. Richard had initiated proceedings against his siblings regarding the inheritance. Technically, he had violated the clause in the will, and the will was clear. Whoever does this loses everything. Richard's lawyer tried to argue that the clause's intention was to prevent fights over money, not discussions about business management. But the judge saw no difference. The wording of the clause was crystal clear: any legal proceedings related to this inheritance. Company management was related to the inheritance. There was no way around it. In 2006, 3 years after Thomas's death, the judge gave the sentence. Richard Harrington was disinherited. His share, about $100 million, was redistributed between Margaret and Daniel. Richard left the courthouse with 0, nothing. After working 30 years alongside his father, after helping to build that empire, he lost everything because of a single clause that nobody took seriously. But the story doesn't end there, because now Margaret and Daniel had to decide what to do with the company. And guess what? They couldn't agree on anything. Margaret wanted to sell everything and divide the money. Daniel wanted to keep some properties as long-term investments. The arguments started again, only now it was just two fighting instead of three. And Margaret made the same mistake as Richard. She filed a lawsuit requesting the forced sale of assets. And Daniel, seeing what had happened to Richard, made the same move. He invoked the clause. Can you believe this? In 2008, 5 years after Thomas's death, Margaret was also disinherited. The entire fortune, $300 million, passed entirely to Daniel, the visual artist from New York, the guy who never wanted to know about business, the son the family always considered uninterested, got everything. Richard and Margaret tried to reverse it in court. They spent years fighting, spent millions on lawyers, but the will was airtight. Thomas Harrington had hired the best estate planning specialists in Chicago to write that document. There was no loophole. There was no way to break it. Today, Richard lives in a rented apartment in Miami. He works as a real estate consultant, earning a fraction of what he used to earn. Margaret got divorced, lost her house, and lives with her daughter in Seattle. Daniel sold the company for $400 million in 2015 and never spoke to his siblings again. A destroyed family, a dismantled empire, all because of a clause that nobody took seriously. But this isn't the only case. There's an even more brutal story. The Westmore family from England had a fortune estimated at £500 million, investments in oil, mining, properties in London, Monaco, and Dubai. The patriarch, Sir Edmund Westmore, died in 2011 at age 84. Edmund had 4 children, all adults, all successful in their own careers. Nobody depended financially on their father, but of course everyone wanted the inheritance. Edmund's will had a different clause. It wasn't about lawsuits, it was about marriage. The clause said that any heir who divorced within the first 10 years after the testator's death would lose their share of the inheritance. Edmund's intention was clear. He wanted his children to value family, to maintain stable marriages, not to throw everything away on a whim. At the time of the will reading, all 4 children were married, long-standing marriages. One of them had been married for 20 years, another for 15. It seemed impossible that anyone would get divorced precisely in the next 10 years. 3 years later, in 2014, the eldest daughter, Victoria, discovered that her husband was having an affair with his secretary. It wasn't suspicion, it was certainty. Photos, messages, everything documented. Victoria was shattered. 22 years of marriage thrown in the trash. She wanted a divorce, obviously, but then someone remembered the clause. If she divorced before 2021, she would lose £125 million. So Victoria did what many people would do. She decided to endure it, stay married on paper, but separated in practice, wait for the 10 years to pass. But living in a lie of this size takes its toll. Victoria entered deep depression, started drinking. Her relationship with her children collapsed. In 2016, she had a nervous breakdown and was admitted to a psychiatric clinic. Her siblings were worried. They suggested she get divorced, that mental health was more important than money, but Victoria was convinced she could endure until 2021. Just a few more years. She could do this. In March 2017, Victoria committed suicide. She left a letter saying she couldn't live that way anymore, that the clause in the will had turned her life into hell, that she felt trapped in a golden cage. The family was devastated. The 3 siblings tried to sue the estate, arguing that the clause was immoral, that it had caused their sister's death. But legally, there was nothing to be done. Edmund Westmore was within his right to include that condition in the will. Was it cruel? Maybe, but it was legal. Victoria's share was redistributed among the other 3 siblings. Blood-stained money. None of them could touch that money without feeling guilt. 2 of the siblings donated the extra share to charity. The third used the money to create a mental health foundation in Victoria's name.
But there's a case that surpasses even these two, and this is the most insane case you'll hear. The Shang family from Hong Kong, billionaires in the tech sector. The founder, Li Shang, created one of the largest semiconductor companies in Asia. When he died in 2019, the fortune was estimated at $2 billion. $2 billion. Li had an only son, Chen, and Chen was everything a father could want. Stanford graduate, MIT masters, worked at his father's company since he was 25, became CEO at 40, a brilliant guy. Li's will was simple, everything to Chen, no divisions, no complications. Chen would inherit the $2 billion, and that was it. But there was a clause that Li included as a way to guarantee the continuity of the family legacy. The clause said, "My son Chen will receive the entirety of the inheritance on the condition that he has a male child within 5 years from the